All right. So I've got a few news items that might be fun. So this is a big deal about Ring. I think these things, I think Ring comes from Google. I'm not sure, Amazon. Okay, so you buy this Ring, it's your doorbell. It takes videos of people near your door, and you can share it with the police, or maybe it's automatically shared with the police by default. I'm not quite clear. I'm seeing different reports. But anyway, apparently they advertise it to police departments and say, help us convince everyone to do this because we'll give the data to you. Sort of like Glock. They do it in conjunction with police departments. And then they've been telling the police how many people play along. And the answer is not very many people do. But now people feel like their privacy is being invaded, that these videos are being sent up without sufficient permission, and they're arguing. But there is some degree of permission, and so they're yelling about it. I'm generally in favor of the police. I probably would be happy to let them see what's in front of my door. It's out there anyway, but there will be yelling and screaming about it. So JP Morgan, I think this is real. It looks like the onion. The vol fee index is a measure of how much the stock market is affected by Trump's tweets. And this has been a big effect everyone's noticed for the last several years. And this means you could make a stock market fund that judges whether to buy based on Trump's tweets. And that would be legal, and they have done it. So you can measure this index and use it to guide your stock market purchases, and logically, I think it should work. So anyway, I know there's also like betting. You can bet on which politician will die, which one will get killed, which one will win the election, and all sorts of things. And I think that's legal as long as they're outside the country. But anyway, so this is an interesting article, and the person who shared this said this is an example of a terrible, immoral person, and I felt like this was a pretty good article, but anyway, that's often the case. I'm often the guy with the unpopular opinion, but this is Joy in MIT. Joy was the guy in charge of the media lab at MIT, and he took money from Epstein, the pedophile. And then he sent emails and stuff saying, we can take money from him, but it has to be anonymous. And this, I think, is very interesting, analyzing the morality of this. I mean, my first thought is you take money from anybody, right? The money's spent for a good purpose. It's not like, but then they say, well, he's using it to whitewash his reputation, to make him seem like a good guy when he isn't. And I said, well, that's not good. And that's why they said they make it anonymous, so his name would not be on it. And so again, I'm thinking, gee, that's probably all right. But anyway, he has a very nice analysis here, talking about all the considerations, and it is very interesting. And what he said is, what you should have realized is the way it would look when it came out. Now this guy was forced to resign. The MIT Media Lab is in disgrace. And that, I think, is the really tough thing about politics. Even if you're doing the right thing, if it upsets people, it can turn out to be the wrong thing. Like another one right now is Trump was going to bring in the Taliban to negotiate with them. And I'm not sure if that's a good thing or not. But when it came out, everyone's madder than hell. The thing that I thought is you can't let those guys onto the U.S. soil because they're crazy terrorists and they'll kill him or kill somebody. I was just worrying about simple physical security. But on the other hand, I would like to get out of Afghanistan, and I like the way he negotiated with the guy in North Korea, but probably not by inviting them onto U.S. soil. Is not the way to do it. However, the general idea. Well, that's the thing. You kind of need to stop the war. They kind of need to have a ceasefire before you can negotiate, which is, I think, why he canceled it. But anyway, people are all screaming and yelling, and it's a very interesting issue. I don't know the correct answer. Let's see this one. My apologies for not attending. Okay. Oh, okay, that's fine. Sure. Got to take care of yourself. Anyway. So anyway, this is a very interesting ethical question, and the kind of thing that I've been saying when you give talks, any of these issues would be very appropriate in this class. Is it okay to take criminal money? And what would you have to do to make it okay? I mean, if a mafia leader wanted to give you money for some good purpose, wouldn't that be a good thing? I guess it's not that simple. Anyway, so that's the thing. The Taliban is mad because Trump said they could come, and then he said they can't come, and everyone is screaming and yelling that Trump must be nuts. And I don't know. It doesn't seem that simple to me either. It seems to me like most things, there was some value in this, and there was something crazy about it. Like almost everything Trump does has to have a good bunch of crazy in it. That's his thing. Anyway, so Google has another face tracking camera, a new version of this home device. People now have these smart speakers that are listening to everything you say and sending it to the internet. and they give their children these smart toys that take everything the child says and send it to the internet. And as we've discovered many times, they just stick it on an insecure cloud server where everybody can get it and let everybody read it. It gets hacked and all that jazz. And now they're going to have a camera on 24 hours a day in your house, monitoring and sending that to the internet. It's kind of amazing how much people are afraid to let the government know anything, but they'll hand everything over to Amazon and Google like crazy. But anyway, that's the thing. And what it does is it recognizes your face and then it tunes to like your programs or something. So it sounds like it would be pretty cool as long as you don't have any privacy concerns, but it probably would make sense to have some privacy concerns. And then here's the stuff that we'll talk more about later in the second half of this class when I get to the politics. This is the stuff that Trump does an awful lot of very disturbing things that make him seem like the worst tyrant, like Mugabe and stuff. And like he thinks that he has the right to change history and everybody has to go his way. That he had the most people at his inauguration, he won the popular vote, he can just make up a lie and demand that the press and the history books be rewritten his way. But he can't. What's that?
Nobody showed up.
Well, you know, what happened is now it's come out, the NOAA contradicted Trump. Trump said that it was going to hit Alabama, but NOAA had already decided it wasn't going to hit Alabama. So within a couple hours, someone at NOAA published a tweet saying it's not going to hit Alabama, contrary to what somebody said. And so the commerce chief threatened to fire the people at NOAA until they retracted that. And somebody at NOAA did retract that yesterday and said, oh, we decided after all, it could have hit Alabama and Trump was right. And now the scientists are all mad, say, wait a minute, you can't change the science for political reasons, but they now have the documents that they threatened to kill. Now, this is not new. Nixon did the same thing. Nixon used the IRS to audit his political enemies, and Trump got into office by promising to jail his political enemies. That's one of the many disturbing things. He was jailing Hillary was his campaign slogan, but then he didn't do it. But anyway, this is some sort of abuse of power, although what's amazing, it's just on such a trivial, unimportant matter. You would think he would abuse power to rig the election or something, but he just seems to be petulant and use it just for his ego. Like, so I know Trump supporters who say, oh no, this is all carefully planned. He's carefully doing this in order to distract you while some important policy thing happens. This apparent pettiness is just a game. And I don't know, how could you ever know if that's true? Anyway, hurricanes aren't real. There you go. Yes, is the 152 project address. I don't know. It should be whatever it says on the website. That's where I would go to look at it. So that should be all right. All right. Anyway, all right. So anyway, there's that. And so Best Buy is the latest Internet of Things devices. This has happened to a whole bunch of them where they sell the devices and later on they decide, oh, to hell with it, we're turning off the server. They're all going to stop working. So all these things you bought are going to stop being smart as they turn off the servers and abandon it. And you have a possibility to get a refund. This has happened many, many times. I think Target or Kmart sold a bunch of DRM music. And then they said, oh, it's too much bother to keep the server up. So your music is all going to stop playing. But for 6 months, we'll give you a link to a hacking tool where you can just strip the DRM out of it. But after that, you're hosed. Your music will stop playing. And this happened. It happened to I think the previous version of the Nest in your home. The thermostat would just quit working. A lot of these. The point is, smart devices mean they have to keep servers running at the other end. And if they come up with a new version or they go broke or get bought out or it's just not making enough money, they'll just turn off the server at the other end. And then your smart device is worse than a dumb one. That's one thing that keeps on happening. So a big antitrust probe against Google is coming, and all the other big things. There's a big war on tech coming. They're going to all get sued for antitrust. And the next election will largely determine that, just like the antitrust against Microsoft, depending on the election. If Warren gets in, those guys are in big trouble. If Trump gets in, probably not. Anyway, that's usually the way it goes. And so the antitrust is going to go against Apple. And boy, this is pretty impressive to like cover the whole screen with an ad. They've gone out of their way. Okay, anyway, so the Apple has preemptively tried to tweak their algorithm to look less guilty. So here's how many Apple apps go to the top. And suddenly, in a month ago, they now let other apps to the top of the store, whereas previously it was just Apple. So I guess they're hoping nobody will notice. This is, I know in court proceedings, you are not allowed to hide the evidence. Once you get a court order, you are not allowed to burn the papers. That's a huge crime. And that seems pretty close to that to me. But anyway, all right. See if I can dig through the edge. Oh, this one sounds very exciting. I've been involved in this myself. I went online, and I was just sending an article about this demo. I went online and found 2,000 records of medical records, and I told the hospital, and they published an official article that I was a hacker and I stole it from them and I'm a criminal and I should be locked up, and it took me a while to clean that up. And my lawyer said, technically you violated the CFAA, because the CFAA, Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, appears to say that if you connect to a website and get data you're not authorized to have, you broke the law, even when there is no barrier at all. When I thought, no, not unless you get past a password or something. And the Ninth Circuit Court just did it my way, because people make website scrapers that will just go to a website and click every link and download all the stuff. And they tried to sue for that. And they said, that's not illegal because they're authorized to see that if it's just sitting there on a website. If you put a password or something, then it would be illegal, because that constitutes saying it's not authorized, which is what I thought. That's common sense. So I don't know if this is going to hold up, but I'd like to see it that way. That was the way I thought it was. I thought if you just put it on a website and you don't have to put in a password or anything, then it's publicly available and you can't punish me for seeing it. But and the general interpretation has been till now that if you do anything with that data that they did not expect you to do, then you're guilty. Because you're not off. For example, if you right-click and view page source and find a vulnerability, you've now broken the law because they didn't want you to do that. They only wanted you to look at the page and buy the product. And anything beyond that, you're not authorized to do. Yeah. But anyway, we'll see what comes of it all. It is an interesting issue. Anyway, we left off with chapter 2, and I'm going to pick up with that and do some more chapter 2. I got 2 slides, 2 presentations full of chapter 2, the one we did not finish last time.
Professor Bowne,
What's that?
I have to sign in to your class.
You have to sign in?
Access.
Oh, you to Ed?
Yeah.
Oh, well, the ad date, the ad notice of last Friday should be a late ad at this point.
No. I'm already enrolled, but I have to access the quizzes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, if you want to access the quizzes, you go to samsclass.info and then to 160, and there's a link here that shows you. You self-register here. It is not the City College Canvas. This is the most common thing. Yeah, go there. Good. And I can help you do it later. Good, good. Any other questions?
Yes.
Yeah.
Did you get my paper?
Your paper?
Yeah. I sent it to you. The email address.
You mean you already wrote a paper for the class?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I haven't looked at it yet. It's probably just in the inbox. Good. Okay, then you're ahead. They're not due for a couple of weeks. Well, good. I'm glad to hear it.
You taking roll call?
No. All right. Now, I don't bother with roll. I just go by the quizzes. All right. So we got to here last time. Good. All right. So the point of risk management, right, is that this is what you accomplish by performing risk management. And, I've been talking to Kerry about this. If you're a company that isn't very organized about security, when you begin becoming organized, these are the benefits you get. So you should see less incidents. You should respond to them more quickly and more effectively. That's the point, if you get organized about your security team. And so you can measure performance. One of the most common things is the time to remediate security incidents. That's usually the main measure of performance of an incident response team, is how quickly did we fix the problem and end this hacking thing. And that is not easy. Most companies cannot even detect that they've been hacked at all, let alone do anything about it. So anyway, there's other time to discover vulnerabilities and stuff. That's even easier. One thing a lot of companies have been doing is, at least, they call it continuous risk management. It's just compliance scanning. They just run a scanner on a regular basis to notice if there's a patch missing, not really for security, but just for compliance. But even that is a step forward. You should have some kind of automatic scans to see if somebody is attaching rogue devices to your network or breaking your security policy. Anyway, so if you got a lot of locations, then there are going to be gaps, and you're going to have to find out where there are the holes. And this is, of course, the most common thing, is that you have some security policy, but there is some part of your company that is not really under control. It's not really included in your Active Directory domain. It's not really got 2FA. It's not really on the official servers. It's not really monitored by the right people. It's maybe a subsidiary or a related business, and then you get hacked like BART. BART got hacked by protesters about 6 years ago, and they couldn't hack into BART, so they hacked into one of their business partners called GoBART that would sell BART tickets and dump their credit card numbers, and that damaged BART, even though they didn't directly penetrate BART. And that's the thing. The first thing is just an audit. Where are your assets? What data do you value, and how many copies of it are there, and where is it? And some of it is probably at your business partners, And that means you have risk, added a risk to your company that is more or less not under your control. So you really have to audit and have an agreement with your business partners.
What's that company's name?
GoBart.
They have to keep it because due to the PCI standard, right?
Well, I would say the opposite. PCI means you should not be keeping credit card numbers. But apparently they were, which many people do. That's why I've heard it said that almost nobody actually obeys that rule, because if they try to run your transaction and it fails, they will try it again later, which means they held the number. So almost everybody holds the number, even though that is technically a violation.
Wow.
That's what I've heard from people in the business. I haven't been able to independently verify it. Anyway, so, all right, so you have measurements of your value delivery. These are all the metrics you use to determine how well you're doing. So you figure out how many of your controls are not used, how many of your controls are ineffective, and how much it costs. And then you can decide what security controls are worth having and improving, which ones are to be removed. And then there's resource management, you know, how much work is being put into your security processes. Typically, it is much better to have like one standard authentication process that works everywhere than to have a hodgepodge of rules. So you'll end up with a scoreboard. You have awareness and access control, vulnerability, business continuity, compliance, and all these things. You have financial, customer, internal, and innovation aspects. And these are all desirable things for your company, and you could measure how much of this you're accomplishing and how much money you're spending on them. And at first it seems like far too much work and far too complicated, but this is the way all the modern techniques are. They have a big diagram like this, and you have to get used to handling all these things. This is what you really have to do, and this is how you start. You start by just listing all the things you should pay attention to, and then deciding how much attention to pay to each one of them. And of course, you don't go from 0 up to having all these things good right at once. You start by saying, well, here's all the 100 things we should do. We're going to start with these 3 things. And then after that, we'll do 5 more or something. You have some plan to get there over years. All right, so you got a business model for this, and this is the main diagram that organizes it. You've got people, your organization, and your technology, and then processes. And you have things in between them, like governing is how the organization controls processes, and culture is how the people relate to your organization, and so on. And this is, I think, the center of the ISACA model, which is closely tied to this certification. So I haven't taken the exam yet, but I imagine the CISM is all going to be, a lot of it's going to be from this diagram. So understanding these things is really important to understand this, the ISACA model. This is called the BMIS, Business Model for Information Security. So here's the elements of the circles: organization, people, process, and technology. Those are the pieces of your company, and all the rest are the interrelations, the interconnections between them. So culture and architecture and human factors and so on. So the culture is a real thing, sort of like morale. It is how people feel. I've certainly been at good companies where people really enjoy the job and they feel on board and they do good things. And I've been at companies that are miserable where people are just frustrated and not even trying and just lazy and trying to find a better job and everything. And it's a big deal. So you only get here by treating people right, accomplishing our goals, training them right, giving them the right, it's quite a job. So there's rules. You have to involve the people so that they feel like they're participating in a leadership, make sure people understand what they're doing, give them appropriate compensation and rewards. One very common thing many companies do is they don't have any training budget, so their staff cannot get training. And if their staff does get training and gets a certification, then there's no way to get promoted. So what happens is, if you do give them a training budget, they will just get a certification and then leave and go somewhere else, and you lose it. That's why there are very few companies that have figured out how to do this. One of the few I know is Drive Savers. I went to visit Drive Savers, and it was amazing. People had been there for like 20 years. And everybody got like 6 weeks of vacation every year, and they got all the money they wanted to go to conferences and learn the very latest thing, and then they would get promotions and put it in there. They were right at the cutting edge of everything. They could take apart everything. They knew all the newest technology, they had all the newest stuff, and everybody was happy there. They would just stay. There was no reason to leave. There was no place you could go that would pay you more to do what you were doing. They were the leader, and that's a good business model. Anyway, but not many people are like that. The rest are just trying to exploit their workers until they're driven away, and then just find fresh workers to exploit. And that's another business model. Anyway, so there's other things here that you can try secure by design into your processes. This is what we're also talking about. I mean, it would be better to actually think about security when you're making new things instead of just rushing everything out and trying to patch it later. But that's a level of maturity that companies don't get to overnight. So you got your governing is controlling what your processes are from the management. And there's these issues like compliance, just obeying legal rules, and then policy standards and guidelines and so on to organize what people do. And there's architecture, which is how you arrange your infrastructure to support your mission. You should have consistency, so people have the same processes used everywhere, the same labeling and all that, and things should be efficient, and you should try to prevent wasted money. This is, again, people just get disorganized. Microsoft used to suffer from this incredibly far. One thing that amazed me, I used to be Microsoft certified and teach Microsoft tech support, and there was stuff like, at one time there were 3 or 4 email clients, all from Microsoft. There was Windows Mail, Outlook, Outlook Express, and something else, all completely different, all competing with each other. And that's because Microsoft's internal system did not enforce any uniformity. It did the opposite. It forced people to find little islands of people, and they would cling to a project to make sure their project never get canceled, and their people stay here, and these people stay here. It's like broken up into competing companies inside there because of a thing they had called ranked evaluation or something, where every quarter, every group of 10 had to have one of them get fired. And that resulted in, the only way to survive was to make a conspiracy with other people and finger one of your team to be the one that would get fired this quarter, and arrange for them to fail, and arrange for your project to never get canceled so you would be safe. And so people had like backroom deals to keep a project alive, whether it was good or bad.
Is this practice still being done today?
No, they stopped it about 4 years ago because of a guy called Deep Throat who started blogging from inside Microsoft and for like 2 years revealed all these company secrets. And it took them like 2 years to find that person and fire him. But before they did that, all their horrible policies leaked out and became a scandal, and they had to knock it off. What's that?
This drug guy is basically 60.
I know, that was the point. It was an imitation of that guy. But he started a blog called Deep Throat, which was Microsoft Secrets. The same principle, yeah. Anyway, so you get resilience this way, you get scalability, and you get security. You know, if you get organized, you gain all these benefits. And so the architecture standard is the Zachman standard, where you have scope and a systems model and technology, and then you have a diagram over here, and again, many little areas in which to focus. To plan how you're going to improve your architecture. And there's a data flow diagram of all these different things. You got externally hosted data, and you have internal systems and financials and a data warehouse someplace, and you've got data flying around everywhere. And this is why I say, if you actually ask somebody, how many copies are there of your all-important data, like credit card numbers, or this is what they need to make this diagram, and it's probably going to look like this. There are probably 100 copies of your stuff all over the place, half of it outside your control. And first you have to find that out, and then you need to figure out how you're going to control all that, and not, because it's in everybody's Dropbox, it's in everybody's email, it's on their iPhone, it's on their iPad, it's on their home laptop, it's all over the place, and that's not a good plan. You have to discover what you got and then rein it in. So emergence is the improvement and letting people innovate. And of course, if you let people innovate too much, then you have inconsistency all over the company and things don't interoperate. But if you have to do a lot of innovation these days, because all your competitors are coming out with new products, and if you're not innovating, you're going to fall behind. And then you've got enabling. These will be an attempt to help people communicate between the business and the technology, which is the huge issue of our time. And the reason for this course and the CISSP course and many others is to try to create people that understand both management and technology, because there are very much not enough people like that. Most people are on one side or the other. They're an MBA and they don't understand computers at all, or they're a tech nerd and they don't understand management at all. And the people in the middle are necessary to make anything work. So here's the life cycle. You'll have business requirements, and that will then change the services you have to do. Then you have business solutions, and you select some technology, you deploy it, and then you measure how well it works, and then you have more business requirements. And this is one of the reasons why the CCDC competition that we do is so good, because you have a network that's kind of all messed up, you're under attack, bad guys are bringing it down, you have to defend it, and then the management calls you every few minutes and says, oh, you have to set up a new web page for the advertising. Oh, you have to add 100 user accounts. Oh, you have to add this new branch in. That's the way it really is. You have to do all this business stuff and you're under attack. And it seems insane and impossible, and that's what makes it a good competition, because you're practicing what you're really going to have to do. And this is something I've seen a lot at Black Hat this year. A lot of people finally said they realized that security is just another part of business. You have to serve the business requirements and help them make money. It's not like you're this special magical thing that is different. You're part of the business. And if you're not part of the business, you're not helping them do whatever they do, then you're useless. But security people have only recently grown up to realize that like some people wanted to move our department into the business school. And I always feel like that's probably about right. What we do is business. This is not science. We do not have like new discoveries we make by forming a hypothesis and doing an experiment. Really, this is business. I think it belongs in the business school logically. It may not be the wisest political move at the college, but logically, that's what all of our classes in the CNIT department are, is really just business support classes. Anyway, so you got your human factors, which is the big issue, the user interface design and so on. How do humans actually interact with your stuff? So how consistent is it? How easy is it to read stuff? This is why, Microsoft, for example, is pretty good. They'll have a huge suite of many products and they all are about the same. The property sheet is kind of the same. So once you get used to it, everything is where you want it to be. Apple is the same. They got standards for everything. Open source is notoriously not. Everything has a different configuration file, a different name for everything until it drives you nuts. If you have like Linux and 10 different apps running on your Linux, there's no consistency. And you know that's a problem. So here's an example. If you have a new policy affecting how people can use their personal devices to access the email, then this is going to affect everything, right? So you're going to have the organization make the new policy, then it goes through governing. It's going to change your processes so that the people that are used to doing business a certain way, like they go to a meeting, they take along their phone, they try to like check that message from last week to see what they need. Now they can't because you changed the policy. So now you're fouling up their processes. And so you can then follow it through your steps. Then you're going to mess with the people and technology this way. And that's the point of this organization. So you can just have guidance to consider what the consequences of a change are going to be. Here's another one. So an outside security audit shows that some of your servers are months behind in security patches. And yet you do have compliance scanning on your network. So the question is, what's wrong here? The compliance scanning should have detected those missing patches. So you can now say we have a technological problem. And so now you can start moving down this chart to track it down. So one possibility is the technology itself is broken. The scanner is not working. That's a possibility. If that turns out not to be true, then you can move out here. It could be human factors. Maybe the people are not running the scanner correctly because they don't understand it, or it could be the architecture. Maybe your network has some kind of segmentation and the scanner can't reach the whole network. And then you could go here, enabling support. Maybe there's a business process. You can interview your engineers and find out, and what you find out is somebody's been adding new networks which are doing things on the company, but they did not connect them to the list in the scanner, because you're failing communication. But that's the idea. This is not like this is really a mathematically pure diagram that proves this. This is just an organizing your thoughts so you will think of the likely things to try and hopefully find the answer. So I got some cahoots about that. And good, we're at 6:28. We should be able to get through at least the first bit of the next section here. So log in and favorites. Okay, so this is 2A. Yeah, 2A3, that should work. And it's randomized, so let's see if that's going to work. Should have some sound. Why is there no sound? Oh, maybe it's going through my Bluetooth speakers. Ah, there we go. Okay. All right. Okay. All right. So up to 11. I'll wait a few more seconds and see if we get any more. President Dump. Oh, some of you guys are getting pretty good with the names. Yeah. All right. Give it another few seconds. All right, I guess that's it. All right, so time to detect security incidents. What's that? All right, that's a performance measure. Performance of your security program, how fast it is. All right. So which one is not one of the four perspectives in the balanced scorecard? Oh boy. All right, security is too vague. These others are really there. And let me just go back to the slides. The balanced scorecard was back here. I think there's the balanced scorecard. So it's financial, customer, internal, and innovation. Those are the four areas. Security is a big, broad area. Too broad to be in that category. It's the one that doesn't belong. But anyway, that's the security balanced scorecard. All right. So, all right, the BMIS model. What are these things? People, process, technology, and. Organization, that's the thing with four circles and the arrows. You know, that's probably the most important thing to memorize because it's directly ISACA, if you care about the certification. Anyway, all right, so what is the DI that connects organization and people? Culture. Good. See, a lot of people got that. Okay, let me record the winners and we'll carry on. I got Cap and Pink and WK. These people are going to have to tell me who they are.
I'm Pink.
You're Pink. Okay, good. 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 So I know one of you. The others are going to have to tell me who they are at some point. If they want.
Cap.
You're Cap. Oh, good.
Yes, from, Chris Capital.
Okay. Okay, good. WK, that's you. Oh, okay, right. That's actually your name. Okay, good. Thank you. Good. Then I actually have the names of people. Life is good. So let me go to the next one. That's it for 1A, which we didn't quite finish last time, and I can begin 1B, or 2B, pardon me, which is here. All right. And so, all right, so information security governance. We're going to talk about we already been through part one. That's what we already did, getting it out the balanced scorecard and the business model. And this is the rest of it, how to develop a strategy to secure your company with objectives and even more of these control frameworks. Like I say, when I first saw these, I sort of rebelled. That's a lot of junk to memorize because people really use them. And my students who get jobs in the industry say, I really wish I'd learned more about those COBIT and everything and Zachman and all that jazz. People really use that stuff. So I'm not expecting you to memorize all of it, but you got to get familiar with it. And the more you learn, the better for real work. Anyway, so strategy is your big plan to achieve an objective. Like we have a plan to push the Taliban out of Afghanistan. That's a big objective. And so you got to have strategic alignment. You have a desired future state and you have a strategy to get there, which is in broad general terms. And so risk management's got to have a procedure to do this, and you have a value delivery, some way you're planning to get there by improving your efficiency on the way. You have to have a plan to not waste money. You have to be able to justify the money you're spending is going to increase the money coming into your company. That's what you'd like to have. So you have resource optimization. This is one advantage of a compliance and a security framework, which at first just seems to the business like wasting money. You will actually improve the efficiency of the organization by having compliance where everybody has standard processes every place and we have efficient logs monitoring what people are doing, we'll now be able to measure things, and therefore we'll notice waste and foolish duplicated effort and so on. And so these are the benefits to your company. But of course, just like telling somebody to organize their life and go to the gym and everything, it's not fun, and there's a painful transition period of getting there. They say once you achieve that, then you'll be better off. But of course, you're having fun being a slob, all disorganized, and it's not exactly fun to straighten out. But it does lead to a better place once you do it. So here's a bunch of these frameworks, COBIT and the ISO ones, and ITIL and HIPAA and NIST and CIS and PCI-DSS. The basic, it's kind of nuts. There are all these frameworks and they all do the same thing. And they're all pretty much the same, but they focus on different types of business, but they all tell you the same stuff. You got to quit using the same password for everybody. You got to have your network segmented. You got to have two-factor authentication appropriately and all this jazz. There's obvious stuff you ought to do. So this is the one developed by ISACA, and it had 4 domains: plan and organize, acquire and implement, deliver and support, and monitor and evaluate. And they're all like this. It's all the same general philosophy. You decide what you're going to do, you figure out some way to do it, and then you figure out some way to measure how well you were doing it so you can go back and improve and have a continuous cycle of optimization. So you got 37 processes, including a lot that are not directly around security. And here's the security ones: risk optimization, managing risk, managing resources, and like always, measuring your degree of compliance. And then you can go back and improve your goals at the top and go through the cycle again. This is an international standard, ISO, and this has requirements and controls. They don't even sell the documents without you paying money for the documents, which is why a lot of people find that it's not the most popular one to study that way. But anyway, this typically costs thousands of dollars and takes up to a year to achieve. ISO 27001 is very famous. I've heard people say they spent millions of dollars achieving it. This is a big one. Huge people like the military expect you to have this. And it's a big deal for your company to achieve this. This is not the first compliance standard you would have at your company. You would have easier ones and work your way up to this. But once you achieve it, you'll then be in a very small elite able to bid for really big contracts with really big customers that must meet the standard. So here's the requirements. You got to have the leadership, your planning, support, operations. You got to have performance evaluation and continuous improvement. That's the general metric of them all. You got to have a lot of policies. And from a viewpoint of like a lowly tech person, what I see is just a ton of management and a blizzard of paperwork being filled out for every little step. But that's what it is. You must do all these things, and you must submit audit reports internally and externally to prove that you've done all these things. And you have a whole bunch of managers filling out forms and irritating me for making me fill out forms and stuff, but that's what you're doing. And you're not really ready to play in the highly trusted major organizations until you have all this administrative overhead. It's a whole lot different than just being in your garage making something and then selling it because it's good. You have all these managers above you filling out forms. And if you've been in the military, you're used to the military is the king of this, where there's many, many layers of bureaucracy and forms and tests going on, which can be inefficient and maddening, but that is the way it is. And when it works, of course, it results in a better product. But of course, there are many places where it doesn't work. Anyway, so you've got controls all over the place. Controls are things that create security boundaries by limiting what you can do, things like passwords and firewalls and antivirus. So you got operations, communication, security. You've got controls over your acquisition. It's almost impossible to spend any money at the college because there are so many controls. You have to fill out forms and go out for bids, and this person has to approve it and that person has to approve it. And of course, all that happens because people kept stealing the money. So every time people would steal the money, they put in another blockage of control until it gets really burdensome to get at the money. And so on. You've got all these other controls all over your company. You got governance. Anyways, your ISO 38500 is another similar one. And this one here, ITIL, is the one that was developed by the UK. Another one doing more or less the same thing. Then there's HIPAA, which was specifically made for health insurance. This was, I think it was a Bill Clinton era thing. Anyways, while they decided that they wanted to do something about the fact that medical records were all on paper in like file cabinets. So if you were to take a vacation and get hit by a car, nobody could find your medical records. They'd have to somehow go back to your hometown and find them. And they said they should be on the internet. So they wanted to standardize them and put them all on the internet. But then they said, we're going to lose them. So along with that comes a security requirements. First, you have to put everything on the internet, and then you have to meet some security. And so it requires that you have administrative, physical, and technical safeguards, and it does so only in general terms. It does not say you must encrypt them with 128-bit AES or anything. It just said they have to be encrypted in storage and transit and protected, which is what laws should say, like the 10 Commandments. They don't tell you exactly what product to use. They say, here's what you must do. You must protect them so only authorized people can see them. That's what you're supposed to say. And then the details of how you do that will, of course, keep changing. Anyway, so then there's NIST SP 853. You hear about this all the time. All federal devices have to obey this standard. So all government devices. So everybody pretty much has to obey this thing. It's very well known, very widely adopted, of course, because everybody that wants to do business with the government has to comply with this. And so it's not just the government, it's everybody who wants to sell to the government. This is why the thing I liked was IP version 6. IP version 6 was a mandate we were supposed to do in 1993. People were slow to adopt it. So the US government created adoption without passing a law. They just put it in the standard to where everything had to have IP version 6 or the government couldn't buy it. So suddenly Apple and everybody and Microsoft built it into their stuff because the government's a big customer. So they didn't have to pass a law. They just said, you know, you're not going to meet our standards. And the government's with their buying power, they were able to enforce this technological upgrade. So there's 18 categories all over the place: access control, awareness and training, configuration management, contingency planning, and incident response is in there. And you got to control your media and your environment and your personnel and your program management. Just, you know, what you'd expect. All the things you want to have to be in there, and they have to be up to the standard or you're not compliant with this. Now, I believe, by the way, this is the one, there's a DoD one, which they published a few years ago, and then they published the audit results, and they showed that 95% of government systems are out of compliance. And I think this might be the one where they were able to print the document saying what you should do, but they can't actually afford to comply with it. This is generally true. There's what you're trying to do, and then there's reality quite a bit behind. Anyway, I don't know, some people might meet this one, but I know I see these news articles about how the DoD is, in fact, very far from where they're supposed to be. Yeah.
Just like the ISO 27001, this 800-53, the cost varies by company?
Yes. It doesn't, and I think 853 is a much lower standard than ISO 27001. I think this is what you would do just to sell to the company, and 27001 would be putting you up like at level of Lockheed Martin, up to really major people.
Thank you.
Yeah, but I'm not really sure. I've never achieved any of these. I need help from my students who often get real compliance jobs. I was always a tech guy. I never really been the manager doing this stuff. Although one of my students went off and brought a company into PCI compliance, and I got to hear his stories. And so those stories and guest speakers will be how you learn more about that, because I'm not qualified to tell you real war stories about this. Speaking of which, I ought to mention, in case anybody imagines we're going to really focus on this certification, you should know there's a whole bunch of guest speakers coming, so it'll be a while before we get back to the textbook, and I don't mind that at all. I'm not all that tied to completing this CISM stuff. I think just hearing the reality of the world is more important. So we got 3 guest speakers in a row, and then we'll go back to the textbook, unless some of my other guest speakers come up, because there's a DOJ guy I want. We might have more than half guest speakers from now on, and I have no problem with that, because you'll hear the reality of what really happens. And I'm not that wedded to the textbook and the certification. We may not get through all that, but be warned. So if you came here specifically to get that certification and that's all you care about, you might feel ripped off. But I don't recommend that really. I think you need to find out what's really happening. And that book is just one way to do it. These other people can tell us what's really happening out there. So anyway, I saw a chat message come in. Felony source viewing. Now, view source is illegal. Well, I think that's what my lawyer told me. He said, the CFAA as written says that if you send a signal to a server and the response tells you something you're not authorized to know, you have now broken the law. That is what it appears to say. But what most of us thought that meant was something where we had to penetrate a barrier. But the law doesn't say that. But maybe as a result of this finding, it will be interpreted to mean that, if this finding holds up. So it is not clear, and that's the nasty thing about the law. I used to say I'm a white hat, I obey the law, and then I found out what everybody else found out. The law is not that clear. And when you do stuff, it's not 100% clear whether you're breaking the law or not. You have to have a lawyer, and your lawyer has to go like help you navigate through. Even when you're doing what seems perfectly reasonable, you might get sued or something, and then you discover there's not really much such thing as being 100% legal. There's some risk if you do anything. And so you have to accept that and have a lawyer and cooperate with them and defend yourself, even when you're doing what seems quite reasonable. Anyway, so there's the CSF framework. This comes from NIST-CSF. I thought this was the one that came from the 20 controls. That's the one I'm going to come back later. So this is another one similar to 27001. It's got a framework core with this identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. And then an implementation and a profile with all these functions at your company. And it amounts to the same thing that we've been describing. And this is the one from the SANS 20 security controls. You probably know SANS. They make these expensive classes that are really quite good. But anyway, they also published the 20 critical security controls, which is a well-known list of like recommended procedures. And they have a framework tied to those controls where you do these 20 recommended things. And I don't think I have, oh, here they are, there. So you inventory your devices, you have secure configurations for things, you have continuous vulnerability assessment. That's why I say you should be scanning to see if people are breaking your security policies, limit administrative privileges, malware defenses, and data recovery. There they are. These are all like common sense things, but quite good. You know, these are like 20 things you should be doing: pen test and incident response and boundary defenses and secure configurations for your devices. This is a perfectly good, well-respected list of stuff you should be doing. And like I say, every compliance framework is pretty much going to require you to do these things. They just mix them into different boxes. All right. And then there's PCI-DSS, which is an industry self-regulation standard, which Visa and MasterCard and Amex and Discover got together to decide what they would require for people to take credit cards. And it is notoriously ineffective, obviously, because we keep having credit card breaches, and all those people were PCI compliant, or they wouldn't be able to process the credit cards. So in fact, it's kind of a sham. They have all these rules, but you don't actually have to obey them. You just have to like whine and say, gee, it would be too expensive to comply, and we have some other control, and it'll be fine. So they did things like until 2010, they would still let you put your credit cards in a WEP encrypted network, even though everybody knew how to crack WEP since about 1999. And in 2010, they finally said, okay, now we're going to not let you use WEP anymore unless you like write a document whining about it, in which case you get like a 2 or 3 year extension. So it's like you would think, it's industry self-regulation, and the industry really doesn't feel like regulating itself very much. So anyway, there's a huge pressure to regulate them. And I think if Congress was not so completely paralyzed by partisan division, they would long ago have defined real security standards. It looks like that's never going to happen, though, because the polarization in our country is just getting worse and worse, and the government seems to be basically paralyzed, unable to pass any laws. But
actually, there's another comment that they don't want to strengthen the voting machines because the Republicans want to win.
Of course, yes, that's one of the many issues. There are many big cybersecurity issues, and none of them are moving forward.
And I found a video for you for discussion if you want to play it.
All right, well, I'll look at it after class. Anyway, so, all right, so here's their control objectives. You know, have a firewall, don't use default passwords, you know, encrypt stuff, have malware protection, you know, the same old obvious stuff that everybody should be doing. Have network monitoring so you know what's happening, test your stuff, have a policy. You're supposed to have all that. You can see these are pretty vague. And in fact, I know if you get less than, I think, 10 or 50,000 transactions a year, you don't even have to prove any of this. You just have to sign a document checking off, oh yeah, I did that, and they don't test it. If you get up to like 300,000 transactions a year, then you actually have to pay for an audit. And this is a special type of auditors, have to be approved QS auditors or something. There's these auditors that come in to check to see if you're PCI compliant. And anyway, so that's the joy of PCI. And I've got my more cahoots.
Actually, the standard is 9,000, right? You get cash above 9,000, you have to report it to the IRS.
Well, that's a different issue.
Yeah.
That's know your customer, which is also a big one, but that's not PCI. That's federal. But it is affecting the cryptocurrency people and anybody else that wants to be a bank, like Facebook.
There's another one that wants to be a bank. Coinstar wants to give you Bitcoin.
Oh.
You give them your ID and stuff.
Coinstar
Don't ask me how good it is.
Coinstar is the thing that takes your pennies and counts them.
Yeah.
They want to give you Bitcoin?
Yes, now they give you Bitcoin.
Yeah, it's
There you go. Is that 2 points of research? I found that.
That sounds pretty mad.
I'll take all my points for all my research.
Well, you're not going to get points for just finding that, but still, it is an interesting issue. Boy, well, the Bitcoin people all think someone's going to jump on board with it. I'm not in a hurry to jump on it. But I think the one thing we know, the Bitcoin is not going to be totally hacked. That's true. But its value does go up and down wildly. So it seems like, I don't understand how many customers really want Bitcoins, but maybe there are some. Anyway, well, this is pretty good. There's the,
That's funny.
you could make the, there's that code, right? Up, up, left, left, AB, Konami code.
I love this almost not smelling face. That's not a.
Yep, yep. Well, there we go. Good. You got some pretty good ones here. I'll wait a few more seconds and see if we have any more Kahooters coming. Which we refer to, yes. All right. Give it a few more. All right. Let's take a look at this stuff. Okay, which one was from Isaka? Therefore, logically, the most important for us. All right, that's COBIT. All right.
There's a good joke in there. Which one came first, the HIPAA or the ISO?
Yeah, I don't know. All right. So which one is required for all government systems? Everybody should know this one. All right, that's the NIST one, of course, National Institute of Standards. All right. Which one is based on the SANS critical controls? All right, that's the CIS 20, the 20 controls. And which one was developed in the UK? All right, that's the ITIL. All
Are
right.
their standards better than ours now?
Well, I don't think anybody ever says which one's better. You just decide what you have to do to meet whatever your customers need. M. Hino, that's a real name. 38E is totally not a real name. Mr. Young is probably not a real name. Is it really Mr. Young? Oh, good, good. That's a real name. Good, good. That's fine.
What are you
Then
expecting?
the only one,
CIA
38E, will have to tell me who they are if they want their points. Well,
Yeah, that's what the stands expecting.
Mr. Young, that's good. That'll do. An actual real name is much simpler than all right. Anyway, 38E is going to lose their points unless they tell me who they are. But anyway, why don't we take a break till 5 after 7, and then I'll talk about one of the color aspects. I've got, I want to talk about this book called Ill Winds, which is the political stuff, which I think is interesting. I'm not going to do any more of the chapters. You got 2 sections. I'll put them off to another day. So I'm going to pause the recording. I'm going to stop the recording, but I'll leave the share going.